Okay, so let's begin. Today is the 10th day of the Hebrew month of Shvat. It's called Yud Shvat. It's an important date in Chabad for two reasons. First of all, in 1950 is the date that the previous Rebbe passed away. And on the same date, exactly 1 year later, the present Rebbe assumed leadership of the Chabad movement. Um, the previous Rebbe, his name was Yosef Yitzchak, the Rebbe Yosef Yitzchak, but the accepted title was actually an abbreviation of the Hebrew letters, which is Rebbe HaRayatz. Rebbe Yosef Yitzchak being condensed into Rayatz. The Rebbe was born in Lubavitch, town of Lubavitch, in 1870. As we mentioned, passed away in New York in 1950. And then, as we said, the Rebbe, in actuality, the Rebbe was quite active during that year of between the former passing of the leadership. The previous Rebbe was the father-in-law of our Rebbe. So there's a continuation, not only in the standpoint of outlook and activism, but in a way also through family. About the Rebbe Horayatz, I have a certain affinity, and I think for two reasons. First of all, there's a very famous picture of the Rebbe. I was looking for a copy of it to try to share, but if you go online afterwards and look for Rebbe Yosef Yitzchak, I'm sure you can find a picture with a shtreimel and staring at the camera. It's very, very powerful. I remember the first time that I saw it, I was literally not memorized. How do you say?
Mesmerized.
Not memorized, mesmerized, not right? Something like that.
That's got it.
Right. I just couldn't take my eyes off the pictures. That drew me very much towards it. The other reason that I have, which is it's only an assumption, but I was actually born, the hospital that I was born in is in Crown Heights, and only a few hundred meters from where the Rebbe Rayatz was. I was born when the Rebbe Rayatz was still in his office in the house at 770 Eastern Parkway. So I feel kind of, like I said, an affinity. In fact, we have one of our sons is named Yosef Yitzchak because I very much wanted the name. And my wife said that I wanted the name so much that if it had been a girl, I would have given her the name Yosef Yitzchak.
Good question.
Right? Um, the term that's usually used to describe Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak is gvora. The gvora is translated as strength, might, power, or the accepted terminology is severity, but severity in a positive sense. And I'd like to share a story that exemplifies that kind of approach. The Rebbe, when he actually became the Rebbe in 1920, after his father passed away, was in Moscow, and people came to see him. So there was one Hasid who explains that he went to see him, and he was extremely poor to the extent that he didn't even have money to take the trolley to wherever it was that the Rebbe was staying. He came to the Rebbe and came with he had written down the questions that he has, all in serving God, how to serve, what to do, how to do, and all kinds of spiritual questions. When he finished, he was ready to get up to leave. And the Rabbi Varayat says to him, well, no, wait a minute. That's all your spiritual standing. What about your material standing? And this Chassid says to the Rebbe, no, that doesn't concern me. The Rebbe said to him, it may not concern you, but it concerns me. So that's the kind of severity in the positive sense that not compromising, not ignoring the idea that there is a certain the truth, a certain way of life that has to be maintained, and that was the path of the Rebbe Rayatz. Absolute dedication, in Hebrew we say Mesirut Nefesh, spreading Judaism, supporting Judaism, and this is now after the Russian Revolution. And because of his activities, he was arrested in 1927 on the charge of spreading Judaism in Russia, supporting Judaism. So as I said, he was arrested. He was subjected to torture. He writes extensively on the whole the arrest, the whole imprisonment, which greatly affected his health. After 1927, most of the pictures or that you see, or even videos that you see of the Rebbe, either he's sitting down or being helped walking because of what he suffered during that period of imprisonment. There's another story that gives you an idea of the strength, the power of the Rebbe Horayatz. While he was being interrogated, I guess they wanted to know names and places, and who his associates are, who was under him. And of course, he refused to divulge any information. So the interrogator they're sitting down, he opens the drawer to the desk, takes out a gun, a pistol, and puts it on the desk. And he says, "This little toy has loosened a lot of tongues." To which the Rebbe Harayaz said, "For somebody who has a lot of gods and one world, that can be really intimidating. But I have one God in multiple worlds, so your little toy doesn't affect me at all." And continued to not to divulge anything. In the end, he was sentenced to death, but there was, including from America, a great outcry, and the death sentence was commuted first to exile within Russia, and eventually being exiled from Russia, at which point the Rebbe settled in Warsaw. In 1929, the Rebbe came here to Eretz Yisrael. In fact, he was here in Petach Tikva. He didn't come to the Chabad synagogue, but he was in one of the yeshivot here. And later, sometime in the 1930s, he made a trip, I think for about 9 months, he was in America. I know for certain that he was in New York and Chicago, a number of other communities. I'm not sure, so I don't want to say. And he was tempted to remain in America, but he felt that he had to return to Europe because of the pressing needs of the Jewish communities in Europe. And so therefore, when World War II broke out, he was in Warsaw. And eventually, how did he make his way to America? The Nazis themselves sent an SS car and brought him to Berlin in the midst of World War II. And from Berlin, I think to Sweden, where he boarded a ship and arrived in 1940 to America. Upon coming to America, he said, "America is no different." The Rebbe came the following year and served as his not only his right arm, but instituting a lot of the programs that the Rebbe Harayatz had. They opened schools, they opened yeshivas. And so that's a little bit about the Rebbe Harayatz. The Rebbe Harayatz, also especially after the imprisonment, he had difficulty speaking. So he was always a prolific writer, and probably also definitely before that, but the series of books that he wrote. Now, it's interesting, many of the books that he wrote were, of course, on spiritual matters, in Kabbalah, in all kinds of in-depth analyses of the Torah, Gemara, and of course of Hasidut Kabbalah, Hasidut Chabad. But he also wrote extensively stories. It's not stories as much as history. He wrote a multi-volume history of the Hasidic and Chabad movement. He wrote a letter to his daughter explaining also the stories, the history, that lasted 137 pages. This is in addition to all his other writings and sayings. So this essentially is the Rebbe Harayatz, and today, as we mentioned, the day of his passing, the day of the passing is a sign of the completing the mission on earth. Not that the complete mission is ever fulfilled until the Mashiach comes, but we take those 70 years and we see them as one conglomerate of activities, of teachings, of learnings, and influencing. And it's extensive. It's really quite amazing. And he said to the Rebbe, when the Rebbe was together with the Rebbe Rayaz, he said to the Rebbe, "You're going to take over because you know how to speak to Americans." That's another story. We won't get into that at the moment. But in the remaining about 10 minutes or so, I wanted to go into one of the Rebbe Rayaz's writings that is not only astounding, but the impact, the message is so powerful that it really should be. Well, I'm going to save the punchline, the sentence to the end, keep everybody in suspense so nobody falls asleep. I have some of it translated. It begins like this. Rabbi, this is from the Talmud, from the Gemara. The quote is, Rabbi Alexandri says that all, now the Hebrew word is ha'osek. Osek means to deal with, to do, to in this case, it's usually translated as learning. But I'm going to translate it as engages. Everyone who engages in what's called Torah Lishma. Torah Lishma means doing it, learning Torah or doing Torah for its own sake. No brownie points. We're not looking for a reward. We're not looking for heaven above or being excused, that's the right word, from whatever is down below. Doing Torah for the sake of Torah. And this is what Rabbi Alexander says, that anyone, excuse me, who engages or learns Torah Lishma, Torah for its own sake, creates and here I have the translation. He says excuse me 1 minute. Hamani entourage above, and in other words, in the heavens, and one above in the heavens, and entourage below in this world. And why? Because he brings the quote. The quote says, "Let him take hold of my stronghold, that he may make peace with me, and he shall make peace with me." And we won't get into how this causes entourage from above and entourage from below. Then Rav says that anybody who does this learns or engages in Torah for its own sake, creates a palace above and a palace below. And then he brings a quote from the prophets to prove that. We won't go into that. Rabbi Yochanan says that anybody who does this defends or protects the entire world. And then he also brings a quote. And Levi says, if even brings the final redemption that much closer. So we have four things here that come about by someone who learns or engages Torah Shema. As I was getting over a cough, excuse me. So we have these four ideas. So obviously, the impact of learning Torah, Lishma, for its own sake, is extremely strong. Now, here's where we see um, not only the approach, but the genius of Rabbi Harayatz. So he asks a question: why does it say osek, engages, and doesn't say lomed, learn? Everybody is talking about learning Torah, to go deeply into Torah, learning Torah. We said it doesn't say learn, it says osek. Why osek? Lomed is learn. Osek is doing, engaging. Why is that difference? And I'm not very good at translating, but so please bear with me. The Rebbe says that the Torah is light. It lights up the way. It lightens the path. That someone who goes in the path of darkness, when it's dark, the slightest thing can be a stumbling point. He says literally, we're not talking spiritually, we're talking here physically. That when you go in the dark, a small stone can cause you to stumble and fall. As opposed to light, which lights up the way. And the light can be, what do you call it, a flashlight. It can be daylight. But that enlightens or gives light to, he says, Aderech Yashar, the straight path. In which case, even a large stone is not going to be any kind of a stumbling point. Then he goes even further. Somebody who goes in darkness goes by Hadgel is like habit. So much of the things that we do. Last week we were in Dallas. Dallas is an immense city, and the roads are wide, and you get into lanes that only turn left and only turn right. If you don't know, somebody who's there drives all the time, by habit, they know they have to be in this lane, they have to be in that lane. I don't know how many times I found myself in the wrong lane and I had to make a left turn or had to make a right turn and turn around. There's so much that we can do and do by habit. We're used to it. How much effort do we put into it? How aware are we of into it? And that's all, as we said, from a physical standpoint. Now, the Rebbe brings the same idea into a spiritual standpoint. And he says that somebody who does his spiritual work, serves God, is from the standpoint of habit, because he's used to it, it kind of just flows along. He's missing something. He's missing what's called let's put it called a spade, chassidut, the inner feeling of Torah, the inner learnings of Torah, the excitement, the life of Torah, life of Judaism. There is so much that can be done. It's that instead of doing it by habit, instead of being used to, instead of saying, getting morning, oh, now I have to go down and I put on tefillin, to see the beauty of it, the excitement, the life, the energy that it causes. And then the Rebbe says, now we're getting one sentence before like I promised, the more than a punchline, the idea. A person who learns, the whole idea of that learning is to affect his character. It's not enough to say, "Oh, I have a brilliant idea. I'm going to make, come up with a brand new explanation, analysis, or something like that." No, the idea of learning Torah has to be to affect you. Has to be something that you bring into yourself, improve yourself. It's a lifelong challenge. But that's the whole idea of the Torah. Otherwise, what differentiates us from the animals? A cow gets up in the morning, eats some grass, gives milk, and goes to sleep. What are we different? What makes us different? If we do exactly the same, we get up in the morning, daven, go to work, go to sleep. What's this? The whole idea is this idea of self-work, self-improvement. And this leads to now the punchline. Again, not the punchline, but this one sentence, the all-important sentence, all-important approach that really encapsulates the overriding message of all Judaism. With your permission, I'm going to read it in Hebrew and then translate because it's so rich. הסיבה לכל זה היא, לפי שאינו לומד מן התורה, כי אם הוא לומד את התורה. Not a literal translation, but the whole reason of somebody not feeling this excitement, this power, this joy, this liveliness is because he learns the Torah. He learns it and not from the Torah. That's a sentence that, in my mind, it should be right up there with Shema Yisrael and all the others. That's the whole reason for being. The whole reason. It's not an intellectual. It's interesting. I understand that in South Korea, students in public schools learn Gemara. Why? Because it develops the mind. So that's good. It develops the mind. But we don't do it to just develop the mind. We do it because it's us. It's internal. It's life. It's life itself. Not long ago, we celebrated Hanukkah. One of the things of Hanukkah that we say when we light the candles is that the Greeks didn't have any problem with Torah. They wanted to learn Torah. They encouraged it because it's intelligence, but it belongs in the university. It doesn't belong in the house. It doesn't belong in the synagogue. It doesn't belong in one's heart. It belongs there in the university. Get a degree in Judaism, but don't practice it. Practice it. The one of the things that well, no, I'm sorry, we're not really have enough time for it. But an example of learning Torah. I remember one time I went to Tallahassee, I spoke at the law school, and I came and said, "Okay, I'm going to set a whole generation of lawyers in the right path." It says in the Torah, it says, eye for an eye, a limb for a limb. So what does that mean? Of course, if you poke somebody's eye out, they poke your eye out. And that's the way people understand it. But when you go into it, the Hebrew doesn't say eye for an eye. It says eye tachat, eye and tachat eye under an eye. And the Gemara goes into an extremely complex way of determining financial, not provision, financial, excuse me?
Compensation.
Compensation, thank you. Financial compensation for the eye or the limb or whatever it is. And when you see how they put, I don't know if then I was, had God's help and I remembered all 5 things. For example, one thing that they take into consideration is the medical bills. One thing to consider is the time lost from work. One thing to take into consideration is, are you able to function now properly? But the idea behind it comes really to fruition with the last of the five things. How do we evaluate or put a price on the person's embarrassment? Somebody has only one eye. Somebody has only one leg. It's embarrassing. And even for that is compensation. So when you learn Torah and you read an eye for an eye, oh, okay, fine. But when you go into the depth and you see the beauty of it, you see the humanity of it, you see the truth to it, that gives all the life. That gives everything that to conclude, I just want to add one last thing. When the Rabbi Rayatz was released from prison, he came and he said, it's not just me who was liberated today, but every single Jew, no matter where he or she is, was liberated today. And this is kind of an obnoxious thing to say. When the Admor Zaken was released from prison, he didn't say anything like that. When the other Rebbeim who they were all what kind of obnoxious thing to say? Conceited, see the thing that my release, every Jew was released. So why was it? Because when the Alter Rebbe Admor Zaken was arrested, he arrested because he was teaching something about God. They didn't like the way he was teaching about God. When the communists arrested the Rebbe Harayatz, it was because there was no God. It wasn't a matter that they didn't like his God. They said, no, there's no God. They can't no God. And so when the Rebbe was released, it was really a victory for God. God over non-godliness. And therefore, when he said, it's not only me, but every Jew, it wasn't something obnoxious and conceited. It was really the opposite. What's the opposite of being conceited? In Hebrew, say anava. It's the self-effacement, something like that. Is there such a term? But in any case, so today being the 10th of Shevat, when we recall everything about the Rebbe Harayatz. Yeah, just I'll show you the part that I took. This came from this book. This is a book of only 2 years of his of his writings while he was in America. It's just something astounding. So if anybody has comments, questions, I'd be happy to. I see we're running over time a little bit, but
I have a question, Rabbi.
yes.
I went to the Ohel. There were graves. Are we talking about the Rebbe next to Rebbe Schneerson?
Yes. Yes. I'm happy that you brought that up. The Ohel originally was the resting place of the Rebbe Horayatz in the Montefiore Cemetery in Queens. And the Rebbe would go there very often. He came back once and he said that my father-in-law told me so such and such. We can get into that maybe another time, but there was a very deep personal connection. And when the Rebbe passed away in 1994, they broke the walls, enlarged it, and the two tombstones are one next to the other, Rebbe Harayatz and Rebbe Menachem Mendel.
Yes. Wow.
And that serves as kind of like it's like a tube, a hose, a conduit, that's the word, the conduit between the heavens above. And so therefore people go there all the time to pray and ask and just to be, because it's a place where you can absorb some of that immense energy.
And I have a cup of
Yes.
coffee cookie too. Very good. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Keep
Thank
well
you.
and keep warm. Keep warm.
Thank
They
you.
say there's a possibility of another snowstorm next week, so let's hope that everything comes out for the best. Keep well, only Besorot Tovot, good tidings, and everybody should stay healthy. And best wishes for only good things, all things good for all of Am Yisrael.
Thank you.
Tov.
Great.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.